All right, diving deep today. Pragmatist feminism should be fun. Got those excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, the gold mine as always, but,
Oh, yeah.
we're going deeper than usual.
Beyond the intro stuff, for sure.
Right. Like, let's get into the real philosophy here. This fascinating, kind of overlooked corner of feminist thought. What's the good
But it's
stuff?
not just academic, see? Pragmatist feminism, it makes you deal with the real world. Like, what do these ideas mean when it comes to actual change socially, politically?
Taking it out of the ivory tower and into people's lives?
Yeah.
But hold on, back up a sec. For folks who aren't as familiar, what are, like, the big things that make pragmatist feminism different? The core tenets or whatever.
Okay, so huge one is this. Lived experience matters. Like, it's knowledge. Pragmatist feminists, they say you can't just have these abstract theories. Got to start with what people's lives are actually like, the concrete reality, especially women, marginalized groups, the folks whose experiences, well, philosophy hasn't always cared too much about those.
Challenging those old hierarchies, right? Where abstract thinking is better than embodied experience. Saying, no, knowledge depends on where you are, who you are, all that.
Exactly. Which ties into another key thing, epistemic pluralism. Knowledge isn't some prize a few people have. It's made together by talking, sharing different views. Pragmatist feminism pushes us past easy answers into the mess where real problems are.
So it's not just like a theory, it's also how you do philosophy. The method changes.
100%. It's saying, hey, let's be collaborative, more democratic even, value all those views, build some bridges between our differences. And the cool part is this whole focus on experience, on talking it out, it's deep in American pragmatism's history.
Okay, history time. One thing that struck me, so many of the women who were building classical American pragmatism, they weren't just professors. They were out there, activists, reformers, educators, dealing with the big social issues of their day.
Yeah, that's often missed, but it's essential if you want to get pragmatist feminism. Got to think about folks like Jane Addams. She co-founded Hull House in Chicago, right? A settlement house all about social services, education for immigrants, working families.
And a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Yeah.
Adams was big in the peace movement, too. Whole house. That feels like pragmatism in action.
Oh, absolutely. Theory becomes practice. You use philosophy to actually change things. And the point is, Adams, Emily Green Balch, Mary Parker Follett, these women weren't just sidekicks to the big pragmatist names like Dewey or James. They were having deep philosophical chats with them, pushing back, coming up with their own unique ideas.
So they weren't just passively taking in pragmatism, they were shaping it, brought their own lives and views to the table.
Yeah.
But how did these early feminist pragmatists see those male founding fathers? Do they just agree with everything?
That is the question. How does pragmatist feminism handle its own history? And it's tricky. They saw how brilliant Dewey and James were, insightful, but they weren't afraid to critique them either, to say, hey, you missed this, especially when it comes to gender, to power.
So embracing the tradition, A&D challenging it, finding the gems you can build on, but also admitting those early guys had limitations, blind spots.
Exactly. It's a tough balance, but that's how you understand how pragmatist feminism became its own thing, with its own voice within, the whole of philosophy.
That's so interesting, but for our listener, we got to highlight like how radical this was, especially back then in philosophy.
You're so right. Imagine philosophy's mostly men stuck in abstract debates, and these women come along saying, no, lived experience matters, different views matter. Got to connect this stuff to social and political action.
They changed what philosophy could be, and by doing that, they laid the foundation for a feminist thought that's honestly revolutionary.
That's pragmatist feminism, all right. And that impact, you can still see it today, like how current pragmatist feminists look back at the classics, guys like William James.
Oh yeah, they're not afraid to critique the big names, huh?
Nope. Erin McKenna, for instance, she points out this interesting tension in James. He loved individual experience, self-realization, all that, but feminists point out his idea of freedom, well, it kind of ignores all the ways society limits those very experiences, especially for women.
So celebrating individual choice is fine, but maybe James didn't get how social structures like gender roles could make those choices impossible for some folks.
Right. McKenna even says how James relied on the women in his life, wife, mother, sister. They did the self-sacrificing stuff, so each he could be free to do his intellectual thing, grow as a person.
Classic example of what they call the problem of the unseen, right? Focusing on individual choice. Maybe James missed all the hidden work, the sacrifices, that let some people make those choices, while others, they never even get the chance.
Spot on. And that unseen problem, it pops up a lot when feminists critique classic pragmatism. uncovering those hidden power dynamics, the privilege, the oppression that shapes what we can experience, what opportunities we get.
And how's that critical lens been used on someone like Dewey? He was seen as more progressive, right, for his time.
Dewey's a curious one, supported feminist causes, loved progressive education, but even he sometimes you can see those gender biases of his era creeping in.
Examples. Give me examples, I'm curious.
Well, some folks argue Dewey was all about education for social change, right? But in his writings, sometimes you see that old idea women's education is about being wives, mothers, first and
So
foremost.
even Dewey, with his ideals, he couldn't always break free of those social norms that limited women's choices.
That's the thing. And look, this isn't about canceling these guys, right? It's about reading them critically, seeing the brilliance, but also the blind spots.
Not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, holding them accountable, appreciating what they did, acknowledging where they fell short.
Exactly. And that process, honestly, it's made pragmatism itself more interesting, more nuanced. Bringing that feminist perspective, it unlocks new layers of meaning in those classic texts, new paths for philosophy to explore.
That's what excites me about pragmatist feminism. It's not afraid to challenge the status quo, even within its own tradition.
For sure. It's a living, breathing field, always questioning, pushing boundaries, and that matters because it lets us deal with the real world, all its complexity, in a smarter, more insightful way.
And speaking of pushing boundaries, one thing that struck me, these early feminist pragmatists, they didn't just critique the system, they built new ones.
Oh, absolutely. They were pioneers in putting pragmatist ideas into action, and their work, it's a blueprint for how philosophy can be a real force for change.
Jane Addams and Hull House, again, it wasn't just a settlement house, it was like a living experiment in social reform, trying out new ways of living, working together, breaking down those hierarchies, creating a society that's more just, more equal.
And Hull House, that's just one example. These women were involved in so many movements, fighting for labor rights, working for peace, promoting education for everyone, especially women and marginalized communities.
Their commitment to action, it was like woven into their philosophy, right? Theory and practice, inseparable, two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. They weren't just thinking about this stuff, they were doing it. Activists, organizers, educators, they believed UC philosophy to make a real difference. And that legacy, it's still inspiring pragmatist feminists today.
It's wild to think of the impact they had, not just on pragmatist thought, but on the whole landscape of social and political reform. Their stories show us the power of ideas to shape the world and remind us that philosophy can be a force for good.
Totally. Their courage, their vision, that unwavering commitment to social justice, it's a powerful inspiration for us today.
I think for our listener, if we're maybe just getting into these ideas, we got to emphasize this approach, it was and still is radical, transformative.
True. At its heart, pragmatist feminism is about rethinking how we see knowledge, power, even the whole point of philosophy itself.
It's about going beyond those old academic walls and finding a way to think, to be in the world that's more engaged, more embodied, more aware of social issues.
And that challenge, I think, it's more relevant now than ever.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of relevance, one thing that really impressed me was how pragmatist feminism has adapted to our complex, interconnected world.
You're talking about that global turn in pragmatist feminism, right?
Yeah, so cool to see how scholars are bringing in ideas from feminist movements all over the world, making the conversation richer, expanding its reach.
Shows how dynamic pragmatist feminism is. It's not some rigid dogma. It's a living tradition, always growing, changing as new challenges and perspectives come up.
And that global turn, it's so important because it gets us past that Western-centric view of feminism. We start to see how diverse the global feminist movement really is, all those different experiences, perspectives.
Totally. Clara Fisher, for example, she brings in Irish feminism. Nuria Saramiras Boronat, she's connecting pragmatist feminism with Spanish and Catalan thought.
It's like pragmatist feminism is finally living up to its own ideals, Pluralism, inclusivity, all those voices, experiences welcomed in.
Exactly. And that global dialogue, it's changing the field in profound ways, makes us rethink our ideas about gender, power, social change, and it opens up new possibilities for working together across borders in solidarity.
So as we go deeper into this global landscape, what are the big questions, the challenges, what are the frontiers of this field that excite you most?
I think one of the most exciting areas is like how can pragmatist feminism help us with these huge global problems we're facing? Climate change, inequality, all that.
Yeah, those feel almost impossible to solve sometimes.
Yeah.
How can philosophy, even pragmatist feminism, even start to deal with them?
Well, that's where those core principles we've been talking about, they come in. Like focusing on lived experience, right? It reminds us climate change, inequality, these aren't just abstract ideas. They have real effects on people's lives, especially folks who are already struggling, marginalized.
It's about hearing for the people actually being impacted, not imposing solutions from, like, some think tank or whatever.
Exactly. And then epistemic pluralism, that encourages us to get past simple either thinking, see how complex these things are. Climate change, it's not just an environmental problem, right? It's tied up with social justice, economics, politics, the whole thing.
So seeing how everything's connected and the solution's got to deal with all those different sides.
Yes. And then that pragmatist focus on action, that reminds us we can't just sit around theorizing. Got to get involved, work together if we want real change.
Put then ideas into practice, right?
Yeah.
Less talk, more action.
Totally. And that's where that global turn in pragmatist feminism, it gets really important. By listening to feminist movements and thinkers from all over the world, we can come up with better, more nuanced ways to deal with these global challenges.
Tapping into like a global network of knowledge and experience, learning from the people who are already on the front lines.
For sure. And it's about solidarity, too, building those connections across borders, realizing, hey, we're all in this together.
So for our listener, they've been following along with us, thinking about these ideas. Where should they go next? What are some key things to take away as they keep exploring pragmatist feminism?
I'd say first, pragmatist feminism gives you a really powerful way to understand how theory and practice connect, how philosophical ideas can lead to real action. Philosophy isn't just some intellectual game, you know? It can be a tool for making the world more just, more fair.
Taking all this stuff we talked about and actually doing something with it in our own lives, our communities.
Exactly. Second takeaway, never forget lived experience, especially the experiences of women and marginalized groups. Knowledge depends on where you are, who you are, all that. Gotta listen to a diversity of voices.
Challenging those old ways of thinking, who gets to be the expert, and instead making philosophy more inclusive, more democratic.
And lastly, I think pragmatist feminism offers a lot of hope. It reminds us that change is possible, that we can work together and build a better world, even when things seem really tough.
It's a call to action, to engage with the world, but do it with critical thinking, compassion, and a commitment to social justice.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into pragmatist feminism, I hope you're feeling inspired, maybe even a little fired up. It's such a lively, evolving field, and it gives us these amazing tools for understanding our world, for making it a better place for everyone. Keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and remember those pragmatist principles as you navigate, all the craziness of our times.
And remember, you're not alone in this. There's a whole community of pragmatist feminists out there, ready to talk, to work together to build a better future.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.